The With Life podcast is brought to you by partnership of nRhythm and Capital Institute. Today, we stand at a critical juncture. Our societal and environmental systems are strained, plagued by injustice, extraction, disconnection, and imbalance. We're all searching for new ways of creating systemic change. The With Life approach offers a new path forward. With Life is an approach to organizing that holds the patterns of living systems at its foundation. It empowers each of us to reconnect, regenerate, and heal. The With Life podcast features stories, interviews, and dialogues with entrepreneurs, activists, artists, scientists, farmers, writers, and designers. Together, we reimagine how we organize in a way that catalyzes healthy, resilient change in all systems so that businesses, communities, farms, schools, governments, and entire economies align with life, work with life, and are ultimately thriving with life. Today, I'm joined by John Fullerton, Tre Cates, and Moh Al-Haifi. John, Tre, and Moh, welcome. It is so nice to have you here today.
Thank you,
Great
Natalie.
to be here.
I'd like to start by grounding us in a little bit about what each of you do in the organizations that you founded and why you do the work that you do. John, let's start with you. Can you tell us just a little bit about the Capital Institute?
Sure. Well, I founded Capital Institute in 2010, really in the wake of the financial crisis. And it was really set up as a place to ask some of the big questions that I didn't think were being asked. So it's an institute, a place of searching and thinking around capitalism and the economic system that we operate in. And I chose the word capital intentionally. It's somewhat of a provocative word, but there's multiple forms of capital, and the idea is to explore what the future of capitalism could look like and needs to look like.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Tre, you founded an organization called nRhythm. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It came out of a deep commitment to seeing the systems that our society have designed to be more in rhythm with life versus in a dissonance or a conflict with her. And I was really committed to the idea that a design for what that looked like could actually create even more abundance and opportunity and potential in the world, and that the way we were currently doing it, we were limiting our potential, and actually with incredible expense. So limiting our potential and hurting our planet and our communities, and I felt like it could be better. And so nRhythm emerged as a solution to find better ways to be in that flow with life.
Incredible. Thanks, Tre. And Moh, you're here from Zebra Growth. Can you tell us a little bit about Zebra Growth?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. And so Zebra Growth was founded about 3.5 years ago, and that was about after a decade of spending my energy and a lot of my time and effort in the marketing space, usually working within the startup or in the agency world. So combining multiple things from branding to marketing, communications, as well as performance marketing. And what Zebra Growth does really is we've been working with over 400 different impact startups and leaders around the world that usually are in their early stages of founding their business and taking their products, services, and value to a specific ecosystem. Or we also help the ones that are maybe going through the maturing stages of growth and are really trying to prioritize, set the conditions for a healthy growth approach. So really, we're challenging how marketing is done in practice in the past and trying to really co-create also with our partners and clients proactively, what the future of marketing in a regenerative context would look like.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is that each of you founded organizations to sort of take whatever area you are working in and do something really different with it as a response to what you're seeing in the world and in the world of work. So given that I'm picking up on this common thread, but how did you all meet and come together? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
How about John? You start with that. Yep.
Well, yeah, Natalie, I think that's right. The Capital Institute is really set up as a place to interrogate the capitalist system, not from a traditional liberal versus conservative lens, but really to try to transcend that dichotomy into something profoundly deeper. And Trey and I actually shared an experience with the Savory Institute. I was privileged to get to know Alan Savory through a synchronicity, probably back in 2008 or 9, and got very intrigued with the work of the Savory Institute to bring what Alan calls holistic decision making to the system known as the grasslands, otherwise understood as ranching, and how grasslands are now managed in our modern system. And he saw that it was completely wrong, and it was in conflict with how living systems evolved the grasslands, in particular with the symbiotic relationship between large herbivores and the landscape. And it struck me one day that that same idea about holistic decision making could be applied to other systems, and in particular the economic system. And so I met Trey through the Savory Institute. Trey came in initially. I think, Trey, you were a part-time CFO, and somehow we couldn't get rid of you, and you ended up I don't know what your formal title was, but I think of you as the Chief Operating Officer. And really each of us took lessons from that experience, and then took them out and applied them in our own contexts. And so it's been great to know Trey for well over, gosh, it must be 15 years now, or approaching 15 years. And in that time, I think I'll speak for myself, we built a fond friendship as well as deep respect for each other's, not just each other's intellect, but mostly each other's passion and commitment to doing what some have referred to as the great work, which I think we're all involved in one way or another.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, it's been fantastic to see what has emerged over the last 15 years. I think I met John at the end of 2009, and it was really at the impetus of incredible energy and change that was going to create, a global impact. And I just had the pleasure of being a part of that team, and taking the work of what we today are calling land regeneration, that language wasn't even used 15 years ago, to 30, 40, even now I think it's up to 50 different countries around the world. And I have been so influenced by those beginnings. John being one of those early influencers, still serves on the board at Savory. I'm an advisor. But it was recognizing, wow, the system itself really isn't holistic. And the reality that Alan was bringing was an intensification of that insight to how we manage land that influences our food systems, and how those food systems influence our economies. And our economies are influenced by organizations that are working in local communities, and all those different aspects. And I came out of those relationships saying, wow, we could change how we design, manage, and run our systems, not just one, but across. It would be it would change the world. It would change our society, and that is a big task. And just like John, big task of reimagining economies. And but we have found a deep partnership in this, and our partnership has gone way beyond just what is, what we're talking about here in terms of being able to see how we can work together as organizations to be bringing this kind of insight and approach to the system of our world. And I'll just lead that into with Moh. I think Moh came in while John and I were doing that kind of work together. And with that, I'll ask Moh to share how he came into this relationship.
Yeah, sure. It's yeah, I think always really humbling, I think, for anyone even listening, to understand the history that sometimes goes behind systems change, really, in general, right? So I did come in definitely a lot more recently, and I'm very excited about that as well. So actually, how the first time I think we came across nRhythm and Capital Institute was when we were starting to interrogate marketing and trying to take a living systems approach to marketing, right? And that is when regenerative capitalism became very top of mind. Actually got flashbacks through my university years, and remembering actually my favorite teacher or professor at university, who was our economics educator or philosopher, I would like to say, because he was the only one that would question systems, but also the only one that got multiple official warnings from the business school that they would get kicked out, basically. And so regenerative capitalism and watching.
That's why I had to set up Capital Institute. They wouldn't let me in any business school.
There you go. But I kind of got that flashback from, business school when I was feeling so frustrated. And then there was this one professor who was actually questioning our systems. And I think that's what attracted me to you, John. And then also what made me discover nRhythm. I think it was at the times when I was co-initiating the regenerative marketing movement, basically a movement of collaborative movement that is run by over 80 marketeers and regenerators across the globe, also actively questioning the system of marketing on a bigger scheme. Really, we're at the stage of unlearning more than anything what marketing shouldn't be anymore, or what we need to shed off when it comes to marketing and growth. And really, I think that was my initial introductions. We then quickly started to talk to each other and realize that we had a lot more in common, and especially I think the visions that we were all trying to pursue had a lot more in common, but also had a lot more in complementary, I think, than we originally even knew. And so it's been a short, but already feels like a very deep engagement. And when I'm saying short, I mean for the past 1+ years. And really, it's looking like it's just the start. So really, really excited where we're heading.
Nice. And Mo, you really are bringing me right into the next question, which is, not just meeting and finding that resonance and, appreciating and respecting one another's work, but how did you end up really coming together and partnering and working together, which, in deeper ways?
Well, maybe I can take this as well first, if that's okay, and I'd love to hand over to you guys, because I mean, with just from my perspective, meeting Jean and Tre and the rest of the whole team behind nRhythm and Capital Institute, one thing that I was trying to kind of block out in my life very proactively is something that got faced very radically, which is the topic of health. And again, it's been something that's kind of lingering around, and I think it's something that a lot of people around the world are realizing. And when I say health, I mean in the most holistic manner. So health of the individual, health of my body, health of my mind, health of the ecosystem, health of my company, health of the entire community and our society. And this is something that I was very strongly confronted with. So even though I was consistently challenging our marketing systems and industry as a whole, I think one thing that I've massively gained in perspective is just the importance of health and how we've disconnected to that, and how that's actually the most natural objective for any living being, is to be healthy. And so this is kind of, and just to give you an example, so health of relationship, I think, was a very important one at the start, because really, Tre and John kind of contacted me saying, hey, we love what you're doing. We love your thinking. And actually, there's maybe a potential need that you could support us with. And that is, we're looking to actually, build more conditions in our marketing department. And so what we did first was go through multiple weeks and a couple of months of let's actually assess who we are as humans and what our foundational beliefs are, and if actually we are both in the right mindset to go into a deep, long, actually lifelong relationship, right? Which again is something that I remember Trey in the first weeks was telling me, because I was telling them, it will help empower you, get out of the business as fast as possible so you can thrive without us. Until Trey mentioned to us, but that's not how nature works, because we are all interconnected. So just a little, maybe introduction to how that relationship actually started to establish. And I wasn't counting the amount of hours that we were spending in conversation. I wasn't thinking, what is the financial cost to that? And I think since then, so much has emerged, and again, feels like just the start.
Wow. So I'm hearing this discussion of health, and that's really piquing my interest, thinking about the health of individuals, the health in organizations, and how that drive to sort of create conditions for health really did bring you together to have the conversation. Trey and John, when you decided to work together, were there similar drivers? Was that the same motivator, or was it different?
I think I think it was at the heart a motivator, and I think we would have used different language when we first started partnering. I think we recognized that the current systems were inept. They were broken. They were not at all designed in a way that would bring both health and the productivity that we would want in a given system. And I think that was the underlying influence of why we were coming together to recognize if economies change, then how organizations need to behave within those economies will change, and it can happen both at a bottom up and a top down perspective, and that's been a great partnership for us to be able to recognize the larger system needs to change, and those that are working within that system need to embrace and be influenced of what that is. But I would say, just from my perspective, what Moh just said is absolutely what is a huge differentiator in everything that we do, which is we believe productivity and efficiency being the only measures in the system is creating an enormous amount of unintended consequences. And what we would like to do is just add health as a measure. And so we can have productivity and efficiency, but is that at the expense of the health of it? And that really is at the core of what we're doing in all of those systems. John, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I what came up for me when Moh first used or invoked the word health was really the decision to leave Wall Street. People asked me why I left Wall Street and assumed that I was, I think, caught up in the make money, chaos and even potentially integrity, issues. And the truth is, I left long before the financial crisis, and I worked in a firm that at the time stood for the highest integrity. But what I felt, and it was really intuition more than an analysis or any logical thinking. I felt the health of my soul degrading, and I literally had to get away from that energy that had begun to get more and more chaotic, extractive, transactional, and I just could feel that it was an unhealthy place for my soul to continue being. And since then, I've learned a ton. I didn't know anything about systems or the environmental crisis, and I wasn't particularly in tune to a lot of the issues I'm aware of now, but I could just feel that something was fundamentally out of sync, out of rhythm, to use the nRhythm, out of coherence. And since then, I've learned both intellectually through studying the science, but also experientially that really finance has gotten, it's sort of accelerated this confusion between the kind of optimizing the machine and investing and aligning with relationships as the core. And this kind of gets back to the origin story of this with life partnership, which is the work on the grasslands. You know, on the one hand, it's true, it was a regenerative agriculture origin story, but really it has nothing to do with agriculture. It has everything to do with how we think and how we see the world. And agriculture was the obvious manifestation of that issue. But our work, and what I'm really excited about, is that we need to unlearn and relearn how we see, how we think, how we make decisions, in all aspects of our society. And you know, for me, the financial system was kind of ground zero, because, as I like to say, the finance algorithm is very much what's driving our economy, but it transcends everything from education and certainly health, including agriculture, but not limited to agriculture. And I think one of the things that the world is starting to wake up to is that this regenerative idea is not just an agriculture idea alone. It's actually something that transcends all life, because it actually is the process of life.
Beautiful, John. Wow, thank you for that. So I'm thinking about and listening to this sort of theme of feeling disconnected. Moh, you said, you know, we've sort of disconnected ourselves from health as an essential measure that any living being, you know, would really want to attend to. John, you're talking about this sort of sense of disconnection in the soul around finance and banking, and then we're talking about how the larger system isn't really serving our health. It's not really, you know, and I think it's not uncommon today to have conversations around sort of the brokenness of those larger systems and the challenges that they present, whether that's organizational, you know, really broad, or all the way down to the individual just feeling like something's not quite right, and feeling a drive to do something different. So as we kind of think about that in that context, you know, all of the work that you're doing is really centered on how do people come together and organize to do things? How are people, you know, creating organizations, creating businesses? How are people forming partnerships? You know, what kind of conversations are we having? And when you start to think about it in that context, you know, how do you see people and organizations really addressing what, you know, we can call the polycrisis today, all of this sense of disconnection, this brokenness of our systems? Can small and medium-sized organizations contribute to solutions? Can they create space for healing? Can they contribute to health? How do you see that?
Maybe I'll jump in on that if I can. I just from a personal experience, working with nRhythm, you know what, when I first started out the work at Capital Institute, I remember having a conversation with a friend, David Corton, and he said, you know, John, you can't be a thought leader and build an institution at the same time. It's not possible. And of course, I assumed he was wrong and that I could do that. And it turned out I think he was right. The organization building task, particularly the fundraising obligation of building any kind of a proper institute, is an enormous lift, and at the same time, reimagining economics is an enormous lift. And I struggled for years to try to do both those at the same time. And and it really wasn't playing to my strength, the essence of who I am. And the relationship that I've built with nRhythm has freed me to really be the true essence of who I'm meant to be and do the work I'm meant to do. And that's one little example of one person in collaboration with nRhythm that has allowed Capital Institute to blossom. But I think the With Life approach and nRhythm's approach to organizing enterprises applies that exact same idea to people, whether they're inside a legal entity or outside a legal entity. It's really, it's really a way of allowing everyone to show up and tap into their true essence, regardless of the legal entities that they're working in. And so we're eating our dog food, as they say. We're practicing what we preach, and regenerative potential has emerged out of it. And I know it's real because I experience it. So it's not just a theoretical construct. It's a felt, experienced reality.
So we're talking about changing the experience of reality for an individual. How do individuals who come together change the experience of reality for the collective, for the larger systems?
Yeah, I thank you, Natalie and John. I think for me, if at the basis of all of this is relationship, it is inevitable that it will change our relationships with those that we connect with and those that are connecting with others. And to see at the basis of all of it relationship versus transaction, which is what most of our economic finance systems are. It's all based on a transaction. It shifts all kinds of design. We would behave very differently in relationship. And to Moh's point, I remember that moment when I said that to Moh, when we were engaging in a conversation where I said, oh, no, this is not about us trying to get rid of you. We want to be in relationship. And it is different, because you fight to continue to work through things, because we believe that deepens our roots, that deepens our resilience, and it allows us to be able to weather all kinds of changing conditions that we know exist. And that's the deep relationship I have with John and the Capital Institute. We're building with Moh and Separate Growth and other organizations. And just imagine if everybody was approaching and building it that way. It would change the world. And that's not Pollyannish. That is a real reality of, at our core, we've designed for transaction. So in and out, with no reason other than how can we get the most out of something. And if somebody else suffers, that's no big deal. That's somebody else's responsibility. And I think we have a shared responsibility to recognize the unintended consequences of our design that have focused and maximized for one thing and minimize other things. The minimization of other things was really at the expense of health and all these relationships. At my core, that's what this is all about. And there are ways to do that I think really allow us to be in, as John would say, a right relationship. But those things become important and prioritized versus they are a afterthought in the current systems design.
It's really starting at that core and then working outward and the broader impact that comes from that. Thinking
if I can just jump in
sure.
and at one point, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where what Tre just said was normal. The culture that I was hired into at what was then called Morgan Guaranty Trust Company was a relationship bank, and relationship banking was a thing. And not only was Morgan a relationship-driven bank, but so was Goldman Sachs. And the pressure, the pressure for profits, the rise of the shareholder value paradigm put pressure on more, faster, quicker profits, which forced banks to become more transactional. And now not only are the big, the Goldman Sachs and JP Morgans of the world very transactional, but even traditional retail banks have become transactional to the point where you could see Wells Fargo extracting false transactions by setting up false bank accounts with 1 million customers as a way to extract some more money to make more money in the short term, with no idea or care for the trust of a long-term relationship. So this is a new way to think, but this is actually not new at all. And it's only the last, I'll call it 30 years of capitalism that is the big aberration to this. Now, that's not to suggest everything was perfect before, but to put the idea of relationship-centered business practices on the table is it used to be that way in my lifetime. It's not that radical.
Fair. We're talking about transactional relationships and extractive relationships versus deep relationships with core. And Mo, I really want to hear from you about, how does marketing play into that? Because certainly marketing can be transactional and extractive. What is regenerative marketing in comparison or in contrast?
Thanks for that question, Natalie. And I think that's something that's obviously been on top of my mind since founding Zebra Growth, and obviously before founding it as well. Maybe just one quick comment that links to this as well is when we're looking at organizations, I mean, we're talking about here startups, businesses, NGOs, grassroots organizations, politically driven organizations. It could be such a wide array of what we mean by organizations, right? So when we're saying, do we see organizations addressing the poly crisis? I'm saying if it's not them, then who else? So I actually think, yes, the organizations are probably the main driver of us addressing the poly crisis. And it doesn't mean that there isn't other, types of communities or also institutions that need to do work. But I also don't want to put my bet on them. And I think we are maybe relying on these institutions whilst we're seeing our world sadly crumble apart. And so I just want to point out that I think the biggest force we have right now, or maybe force is not the right word, the biggest potential I see rather is for organizations to actually be able to collect or come together. So groups of people to come together to reimagine what it is we need to address the poly crisis. And I think that's one thing. And I think another point is the reason we're in this position at the first place. And I think there was a lot of John mentioned the financial background and pressures and our economies. And at the same time, I actually also strongly believe that organizations, and especially capitally driven, unicorn-focused businesses, are the reason we are in this poly crisis. And actually, one of the biggest drivers that led them to amplify our negative consequences is marketing and growth. So before I say, how can marketing and growth be a part of the solution, I also want to recognize that it is probably one of the biggest reasons why we are in this poly crisis at the first place, why we are disconnected and continuously going after adrenaline and dopamine instead of truly connected with the essence of who we are and prioritizing health, right? Collectively and individually, first and foremost, before we really try to reach for our abundant futures. So I just want to say that. Now, when it comes to where does marketing play in this paradigm shift that we're collectively here imagining and aligning to life, I think we need to completely reframe marketing. I think we need to start looking at nature. We need to start to look at what does also the good sides of marketing bring with it? What does the power of marketing bring with it? Because actually it has shifted a lot of systems. Without marketing, could we have actually industrialized our societies? Could we have come up with the internet? Could we have actually entered the third and now soon fourth revolution or industrial revolution? I'm just realizing that now our focus is shifting. So we are now using what we have and the powerful tools that we have to reorient ourselves and enter a regeneration era, right? An era where we reconnect with our roots, as we just said, reconnect with our relationships. And at the heart of marketing, it's all about building trust, and it's about understanding how we can build these relationships in the most effective way, in a most meaningful way, right? So I'll just give you a little teaser on this. We talk about this a lot when we look at the marketing funnel, for example. We look at it at how can we look at it as a way of getting to know the people and the living beings and the humans and the souls that we want to connect with. How do we actually establish a relationship with them, and how can we start to deepen our trust with them? So that's just one very small element of how we're relooking at marketing, and how we see that reframing marketing can actually not only reverse the poly crisis, but help us bring, just equitable abundance everywhere.
Mo, that was so inspiring. I am just fired up listening to your big vision, and it's beautiful. And I think that I'm probably not alone in feeling inspired when I hear conversations like this. And at the same time, we are living in these big oppressive systems, and we are, wrestling with really complex challenges. So what are the barriers, or what are the challenges to organizing this way? What are the challenges to creating organizations, to creating relationships and trust at these deeper levels, to really start to address, to fundamentally shift the way we are viewing the system, the way we are creating the system? What is holding us back?
Yeah, I'll answer, or at least give my perspective on that. We have built organizations and silos and industries that isn't based on relationship, it's based on productivity, efficiency. And it looks more like a machine. And what we're talking about is creating conditions for us to embrace what already is true about our world, which is that it's a living system. And if we were seeing this as an ecosystem, it would change everything. You were thinking about the health in that system, and what would you do to enhance and support the health of that system? So relationships by themselves out of community actually is a quite challenging state for us as individuals and our communities and our livelihoods and our own well-being. But I mean, imagine an ecosystem of businesses that are actually behaving and operating the way we're talking. I actually think it changes marketing. It changes what we do in supporting what would be considered back-end functions of an organization. It changes how the flow of money looks within that system. All of it changes when we see ourselves as an ecosystem and supporting the manifestation of things that come to life in that ecosystem, and allow for emergence to be something that is deeply a part of the design. Us beginning to recognize when all of this comes together, it looks different. Marketing looks different. Product and program designs look different. Finance as a tool within an organization looks different. It gives us hope versus we're all doing our own little thing. We've created, especially in Western society, so much focus on the individual and the freedom that we want as individuals to make the decisions we want, but to recognize that freedom shouldn't be at the expense of the communities that we are a part of, because that connection actually can create even better conditions for more life. And that, to me, allows us to know we're not doing it alone. Not everybody's trying to do it in one thing. We're actually recognizing we need to create something that influences and becomes an inspiration to do this across, which means it is about being holistic in the approach.
I would just echo that and underline it. What we're talking about is not some new consultant speak on a new way to be the best, blah blah blah. This is a paradigm shift, and it's so simple at its heart. It's, to me, irrefutable, which is that we're interested. We use the word sustainability now, to mean lots of different things, but at the heart of this is the idea that we want the system to continue. to use the phrase of a wonderful little book, Finite and Infinite Games. We want the game of society, of the economy, to be an infinite game that continues rather than a game that collapses and ends. There's no winner or loser here. This is about continuing, and we're all humble enough to see that none of us are smart enough to figure out how to do that. So why don't we look to how life does that as the design principles? And that's the essence of the with life approach, which is we're not smart enough to do this with our brilliant analysis and problem solving. It ain't working. In fact, every time we solve a problem, we think we solve a problem, we tend to make a bigger problem we didn't anticipate. But life has gone on for, billions of years solving these problems. And so the very simple premise is we need to align with and reconnect with and become a part of, not apart from, how life works.
Maybe just to add, actually, because I agree with everything that's been said, and I just want to echo what's been said. But I also want to maybe give a very practical example of maybe what a few of our clients also share, and maybe what I've been picking up even in sessions that I've been having with a few of our customers and partners over the past few months. So I'm recognizing that everyone is suffering with health. We're all unhealthy. The amount of reports that have been released recently around the biggest challenges faced with systems changers is level of burnout and level of disembodiment and low levels of energy that we system changers are bringing in, day out, right? I think number two is we know what we don't want to do, but we don't know where we're heading, and that's also extremely scary. So we know that the things that we were taught don't serve us anymore. We know what kind of vague future we want to build, yet we have nowhere to orient ourselves on how we can approach what we want to build out, right? In a more healthy, regenerative, equitable, just way. So how do we do that? And I think this is why I'm also super excited about the With Life collaboration, as well as the upcoming Cultivator I'm sure we're going to be talking about very soon. But really, it's how do we actually orient ourselves when we are not really as religious as we used to be? Maybe some of us are, most of us aren't. If we actually know that our capitalistic institutes and systems that have been forced and shoved into our education systems don't work anymore. And if we actually recognize that we will not even understand how to fully get there. So we're in this limbo of this unknown, the world is burning down and no orientation. So again, really excited about what we can, also provide with the With Life kind of principles approach to, a bit of a blueprint or a bit of a new direction, a bit of an inspiration of how we could actually make things more tangible. And then the last one, really, it's being in a system that's transitioning, right? So we are not only unhealthy, not only feeling lost in orientation, but we also need to recognize that we were building a system that does not exist yet. And so we are needing to also live by some of the rules that are currently existing in our system that we would ideally want to shed or let go. So this transition is also something, and again, why I'm so excited about With Life is because, again, the focus of these conditions, the resilience, the health, that allows you to withstand that, to allow you to face these complexities. And yeah, I'll probably stop there. Hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mo. So you are painting this incredible picture of what it could be like, what it could look like for organizations to focus on relationship, for organizations to work to activate the real essence of each individual member, how organizations can sort of work with these systems that we are currently a part of and also transform them from within and over time. How does the With Life approach fit in? What does it really mean from a practical perspective to design organizations with life? What does that look like?
Well, I maybe I'll start with trying to provide some insight into that. I think it's recognizing that It's nested within a larger system. So to be able to do that, we need that larger system to be designed with life in mind. So thinking about economics and finance and all of these different industries that tend to be designed, again, and I'll sound like a broken record, for productivity and efficiency. It's not designed to create health within the system. But these organizations we can design for allow for us to see it as a kind of a local ecosystem, and one that allows us to consider the different designs that can bring health to the individual. I often say as a first step is, what does it look like for the organization to not be extractive to the individual? Just as a asking that question, so that people don't go home the way Moh just described it, where they feel like they've given everything they have and they're getting nothing back. And we've been in an industrialized society where paying people is enough, and I don't think it is. I think there is some realities to what we're doing that's creating conditions that are not creating engagement. It's disengagement as the norm, and that disengagement is because the financial benefits for people to be a part of organizations will not be enough. And how do we reimagine what that is? And the with life approach is rooted in recognizing the life in the system and how we enhance it. And you cannot enhance in life in a system and ignore the people in the system. Thereby, by very nature, the essence of the life in the system. So we believe if we can enhance that, we believe it creates even more opportunity and potential for the organizations that people are a part of.
Yeah, I just want to again echo and underline the last thing you said, Trey. This is not some feel-good, do-gooder, soft, touchy-feely thing. It's not even simply an ethical position to take, although it is an ethical position to take. This is aligned with how life actually works. And one of the principles I talk about is empowered participation. And what that means is that living systems that remain living systems empower all the components of the system to participate in the health of the system, which is not just nice for all the participants, but it's actually vital to systemic health. So as an example, my feet are empowered to participate in the circulation of oxygen in my body, which is really nice for my feet, or they'd be dead. But it actually is vital to the health of me, because without my feet, I can't walk. And this is where this with life approach is profoundly different than the purely kind of, call it the left political perspective of inclusivity. This is a system design argument, not merely an ethical argument, although it is aligned with the ethical arguments of for example, in a more inclusive society.
So how do you learn more? How do you begin to apply an approach like this? What is it specifically that your three organizations are coming together to offer into the world to sort of teach people, if I want to create an organization and I want to create it with life, with this systems view, where do I even begin? How does that look?
I think John started talking about this when he's talking about some of these principles. We believe there's some patterns that we see in living systems that inform principles that we should design and manage with. And principles just give us an enormous amount of flexibility. We move away from prescription, meaning silver bullet solutions that are supposed to be commoditized and applied across every situation. We recognize that actually dumbs down the system. What we want is principle-based approaches that are based with life at the center, that allow for creativity and curiosity and development in all of these systems. And that's going to build more capacity, and that capacity that crosses the entire organization, not just sitting in the C-suite, crosses the entire organization and allows for potential that we would not realize otherwise. Actually, right now, the machine, the most dominant design right now is the machine design. The machine design is meant to create single purpose outcomes. The beauty of a life-centered complex design that we're talking about is there are emergent outcomes, things that will happen that we will not be able to anticipate. And I think we need a world where we're designing with that in mind, because I think it shifts the energy, it builds capacity and development, and I think the future that we're going to have is more exciting. It's not one that's designed for one thing and one thing only.
So you have come together to create this space, the With Life Cultivator, which you described it as the world's first anti-unicorn incubator. So I'm curious about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the cultivator can support individuals and organizations who want to work in this way, who want to grow in this way?
Maybe I can start here and then hand it over also to you, John and Trey. But just really quickly before actually diving into the cultivator, I also just want to mention that we also have a wealth of free resources and tools and a community of really engaged change makers, systems thinkers, all co-learning together in really trying to understand how to use these principles that Trey has been talking about and John, and really apply that in their real life context, but also get inspired by others and see how they're applying it in their context. And it's really, a community of people that are global, diverse, and can really, like I said, engage with each other and ideally develop deep relationships with each other as well. So that's the first place I would also like just point people towards if they've never come across the With Life concept. Other than that, there's also multiple other courses and interactive on demand as well as live cohort-based courses. And really, the cultivator is maybe the now masterpiece of them all, the combination of really all the experience and knowledge as well as just lived experience from all the team that was co-creating all these different resources and courses and workshops. One last thing I'd also want to say before handing it over is the cultivator is challenging the unicorn accelerator model, the classical narrative that's been around in the startup Silicon Valley and innovation space and transformation space for the past decades, right? Especially since the birth of the internet. And it's been something that I grew up with. It is something that I also used to love. And it was my biggest motivator as a young entrepreneur as well. So I just want to recognize that and say that it is something that I grew out of. And it is because I recognized that, again, it is first and foremost compromising the health of myself as well as our society and our biospheres, right? And our ecology. And so this is why we are saying, actually, and we don't usually like to take anti-stances. I think this is something we could all agree on. However, we do believe that, in order to create a world that is just and that is energizing and that is regenerative, you do also have to say no to certain things. And that is also reflected in living beings, right? There's that intuitive no and yes, this dark and lightness, if you'd like to take it that realm. And so in my point of view, we have to stop obsessing about the acceleration of change, even within the impact space, even within the change maker space, right? Actually, the faster we go, the faster we will burn out. And so we need to actually reimagine how it is we want to create that change. And I think it starts with approaching it, as was mentioning, from an ecological point of view, learn from Mother Nature. She's got a lot to teach us. And the one thing that she teaches us first and foremost is that in order to create health, you need to actually create the conditions. And in order to grow, then you actually need to cultivate that growth over a long period of time and make sure that you're constantly reworking that approach and constantly looking at how is this affecting the health, and are we doing our best to actually improve the health of the system versus are we reaching that KPI faster so that we can and get the next funding round. which is not the intention of this accelerator or incubator, as many of people might, be more familiar with those two terms. And maybe I'll just pass it over to John or Trey. I don't know if you'd like to add any more details around that or any thoughts that came.
Really well said, Mo. I think just to kind of go back, to the beginning of it, this does begin with education. How many entrepreneurs, how many business leaders, how many politicians have actually studied how life works, have actually studied ecology? In fact, ecology is a relatively new discipline. And so we're running the world absent, it's as if we're trying to design airplanes, but no one has studied the law of gravity. We need to understand the science of how life works at its foundation to begin to apply this. And unfortunately, it requires a very different way of thinking and seeing that we used to be in touch with. In fact, our original understanding, going back to all of our indigenous roots, was much more aligned with this living systems approach. But we've allowed that part of our thinking to atrophy. And we've done it somewhat intentionally in the pursuit of this mechanistic efficiency, productivity. And there's a long story behind how that happened. But I do believe this begins with education, which is really, better said, uneducation and re-education, which is why I have invested so much of my own energy in the Capital Institute's education offerings, the introduction to regenerative economics and a regenerative finance program. But once one has that grounding, the big challenge is then to put ideas into practice. And that's really the essence of the cultivator, is how do we put these ideas into practical use in the real world? And as I think Mo referred to earlier, do it while we're changing out the engines while the plane needs to stay in the air. And so it's one thing to have some new insight. It's another thing to create new enterprises along the lines of this, but we have to do it in the context of a system that actually is designed to make this difficult. So it's a huge challenge, and my hope is that this With Life community and this cultivator becomes sort of one of the beacons, one of the lighthouses for collecting people together who are together figuring out how to do this in the real world.
Yeah, I want to add what in some circles may be a controversial comment. That is, our current system, even though it's designed with productivity and efficiency, is not very well designed to create that outcome. I mean, think about our food system. How can we have a food system where 50% of the food is wasted? I mean, is that efficient? Productivity, efficiency. Actually, the productivity efficiency in our current system is benefiting a few. It does not benefit all of us.
And it's destroying the soil that's essential for the food in the first place.
That's right. So the reality of that the current system is incredibly productive and efficient is just not true. It is only benefiting a few, or benefiting, having a lot of power. And so what does it look like for us to reimagine something that actually can bring with it all kinds of other benefits that are ignored because it just seems to be either a waste of time, or especially in this unicorn idea. And the reason why I bring that up is when we think about it from an ecosystem perspective, it allows us to enhance the entire system and it benefiting everyone, not just some people, as a part of this approach. And to your point, John, that it is for all enterprises. It isn't just for the entrepreneurs, but we feel, or the startups, or those organizations that are trying to create quote unquote big impact. Reality is we need community organizations, we need municipalities, we need entrepreneurs, we need large organizations to all say, gosh, we should think about this differently from a design standpoint. Our current systems cannot continue to serve us the way that we have been accustomed to, and we need to reimagine all of them as a part of that. And when we came up with the idea of Cultivator, it was the idea: don't accelerate, don't incubate, cultivate, because it's about creating environments that would allow for outcomes over a long period of time. When you think about it from a startup standpoint, most startups are designed for a short period of time. And then they're hoping they're going to be sold or somebody's going to acquire them so they got some big outcome, right? In reality, that does not exist anywhere in living systems. There's nothing around for short-term outcomes. Everything is around its system. And how do we consider that as a part of that design? And so we think creating that environment, cultivating an environment that allows for ongoing viability and opportunity, I think, is really what we need as a society. I think the 70% of startups failing or organizations failing as they get started is a result of the design. It is. I don't think it has to be that way. And I think there are lots of examples of organizations that can start and maintain a focus on the future in ways that we have made it incredibly difficult for them. And I think that could change.
Yeah, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about the statistics around how many new organizations and startups just don't make it. And, when we are prioritizing all these pieces above all these other pieces, and we're not really looking at the system, is that working? Clearly, it's not working if most organizations are failing. So, you're offering this another way to think about it. It's like, well, we have to play by these rules, but these rules are creating outcomes that we don't want. So let's shift that. And I think that's a really powerful perspective. So thinking about
I just
that,
jump in
oh,
now
please.
if I can. I mean, we celebrate, the term we refer to is exits.
Right.
Yeah.
So we celebrate entrepreneurs who have achieved exits.
Yeah.
And they put it on their resume. I've achieved 2 exits,
Yeah.
or whatever. So again, it's a mindset shift that we're talking about. It's and the other thing I would say is, how many new enterprises are set up that are actually adapting and responding to the context that we find ourselves in. The first time in the history of humanity where the future of humanity is in question as a species, and where not only is human health have we undermined human health, as Moh articulated earlier, we've undermined the health of the planet. And so it's all the same story. And when you undermine the health of the planet, the urgent focus of new enterprises ought to be in response to that health of the planet and in response to the health of people who have been whose health has been undermined. And yet so much of our startup activity is chasing rainbows about some stupid app that's going to make somebody's life a little more convenient, that can get sold in 3 months or 3 years to Google, or whatever. And so we're just desperately lost, and need to reground in this idea of reconnecting with the genius of how life works.
So I was thinking about where we're going with this, what you're envisioning. And I thought about asking, what does it, hypothetically, what does it look like for someone to form or lead or participate in a regenerative organization? And the more that I listen to you speak about these incredible ideas, the more I realize that for you, it's not hypothetical. You all are living, working, and leading regenerative organizations. And you're taking your regenerative organizations and bringing them together to form larger nested wholes. So rather than answer hypothetically, what is your vision for the future? Let's talk a little bit about what is it like for you? Moh, you talked about burnout. You talked about this lack of health, right? How is that different now? how is your life experience different being a part of Zebra Growth and being in partnership with Tre and John here as compared to, you know, that state? What is it like?
Yeah, sure. Happy to give a little bit of a window into my day to day. Maybe just first and foremost, I think also just the term regenerative organization can sound quite heavy. What does that actually mean, right? Is that so I definitely, and I think Sean and Tre would probably agree with me here, but might have different opinions. But I personally see regeneration as the process of life, right? The process of healing. And so, yeah, I'm definitely on a regenerative process, and organization is also definitely on its regenerative process. That means first and foremost, we recognize that we all need to heal, me and my team, because we recognize that we're all sick. And that is something that is very, again, hard to face. But the systems that we're in have forced us to not feel healthy. And so again, the collaboration even with Tre and John has reconfirmed the importance of that and almost gave us that extra permission to go all in that sense, right? So that was maybe the biggest benefit we've gained from the partnership even so far. But it also means that we're constantly living our truth. We're constantly questioning the systems that we built up a few months ago. When I say we, I mean me and my other 7 team members, as well as a network of freelancers and collaborators that we pull in and out. And so that means, yeah, we're consistently questioning, are we actually creating better conditions for life? And that means, are we actually creating better conditions for our team to feel more energized, to feel healthier, to feel happier, to feel more fulfilled? Is the mission that we're on making sense to us? Or is the approach that we're taking making still sense to us? Because that also changes if we're looking at things in processes. Our values consistently change. We consistently, are peeling more layers individually as the core team of Zebra Growth. That also makes us recognize the need to reevaluate the direction that we're going and how we're wanting to accomplish things. But it also means that we're not looking at competitors as competitors anymore. We're looking at, ecosystems and really futures that we want to build together and other alternative solutions or ideas, and are exploring deep relationships and partnerships with people that in the past we would have tried to squeeze out, in a sense, right? We're also looking at kind of the emergence that could come out and seeing more hope than we've ever felt in the past, right? So trying to actually understand that the more we control things in the future, the more we limit ourselves. And I think this is something that John could probably also talk a lot about and usually does. But, the amount of things that arose without us planning them to come that were unexpected, just even the past 1 or 2 years, has always surprised me again and again, and I'm still not getting used to it. So I'll give you an example. Within one of the first years, we had to change our financial projections 5 times to increase them. And I'm not saying it was all smooth. Like I said, there was ups and downs, and there still are ups and downs, and there's still learning and growing pains in many ways. But in hindsight, the biggest successes, whether it was on a health or it was on happiness level, or it was even on a financial, spreadsheet level, came from us focusing on conditions that could help us thrive. And that's really the biggest shift that we've been making. And I'll pass that maybe over to you, Tre or John, if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, I think for me is that last part you were saying, Mo. We are continuing to recognize that health comes when it's shared. There isn't one steward. There is a team of stewards where capacity isn't in one seat, it's across seat. And that we truly have a systemic response to things that are taking away health in our system versus an individual response to that. And that's not to take responsibility away from individuals, it's to enhance the opportunity and the potential that exists when those individuals are in right relationship with one another. And, and so my experience has been an entrepreneur and have started many companies. I've run a small public company. I've built many tech companies. I have built both not-for-profit and community-based organizations. And I can tell you, having been a founder, CEO, go-to-market strategist, and all of this, that I have carried an enormous amount of weight, an enormous amount of weight. And at the end of the day, I was completely extracted. And all by choice, things I wanted to do because I was told this is what needs to happen. And in Rhythm and in this partnership and with John and others, I feel cared for. I mean, seriously, cared for. Tell me how many entrepreneurs who have done the things I've done late in their career feel cared for as we're continuing to build something that I think is going to be bigger than anything I've been a part of in my entire career. I feel cared for. And I do have a hope for our local ecosystems and economies that people feel cared for. And we can do that. I truly believe we can do that.
Thank you, Tre. John, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't want to I don't want to put a wet blanket on that beautiful statement, which I fully share. But what was coming up for me was the dreaded topic of capital. And I've been trafficking in what we call the impact investment world, honestly, since 1997, believe it or not. And this idea of aligning capital with social and environmental purpose, I actually began while I was still at JP Morgan. And there is something about money, capital, that has a grip on our psyche and our identity and our sort of fear, greed, fear response mechanism that is really hard to overstate. And even with all of the best intentions and whatnot, this is hard work, and particularly the bit around the relationship with capital and owners or controllers or influencers of capital. And I don't want to sound Pollyannish about this at all. I think this is hard work, and the crux of it is our somehow it's like we worship a different God. We worship at the altar of money, and it's got a grip on us that is terrifying. And I was listening to a podcast recently, just a reminder that all successful economic systems in the past, I think this is a fair statement, generalization, have been built on some abundance. Unfortunately, that abundance was often stolen in the case of colonialism, or 100% extracted in the case of slavery. But there's this incredible abundance sitting out there for all of us to tap into, which is called the abundance of life. And so we have to switch from creating abundance to be used to create more abundance through extraction to reconnecting with the abundance of life, and which is a very different narrative than what I call the shrink and share. I mean, there are limits to growth. Exponential growth on a finite planet can't work. It cannot continue physically. The physics don't allow it. But the response to that can be much richer and more exciting and more fulfilling and more prosperous than simply we got to shrink and hunker down and learn to share, which feels unrealistic. There's this massive unseen potential that we call regenerative potential, which is the source of our prosperity. And at the heart of it, it is rooted in in life, in how life works.
So I wanted to just close out today by asking each of you, what would you say to someone who is interested in joining the Cultivator, in becoming a part of this community and learning this life-centered way of approaching organizational development?
Maybe I can start. The first thing that's coming to my mind really is just like, I guess, an invitation for you, whoever's listening, to compassionately stare at the truth, which is, let's recognize where we're at right now. Let's recognize what we're doing is not working anymore. Let's recognize that accelerating and speeding up is not going to be the answer. And let's be compassionate to ourselves, yet also take the ownership to drive that change, right? And when I say drive that change, I'd rather say plant those seeds, right? Because this is what this is. It's planting the seeds for a new entire way of how you can run and grow not only your organization, but the relationships, the health of your of the ecosystem that you're in and you're serving, as well as how we can truly invest in shifting systems long term. And this is what we need. It's to think about the next generations. I think we've thought about ourselves enough. So if, yeah, one thing is, let's stop speeding up and let's actually invest in truly shifting systems together.
Thank you, Mo.
Yeah, maybe I'd pick up on that. I have lots of uncertainty about where the future is going and what it's going to look like, but I have complete confidence that we're in the beginning of what I refer to as a change in era, not just an era of change. And that means that old organizations are going to either die or radically transform, and there's going to be a massive upspringing of new enterprises and new organizations. And they are, if they're going to thrive, they're going to be part of this metamorphosis that we've entered. And so it's an incredible time to be a young organization. And there's an incredible responsibility that we do it wisely. And so if this resonates, if your gut instinct is saying yes, then join us. And if this doesn't resonate, then don't try, because this is hard. And it needs to be something that you feel in your gut is the right thing.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I just to add a little to both Mo and John's reflection, part of my deep commitment in the cultivator is recognizing that condition making allows for things to emerge and potential to show up that we couldn't have anticipated. That is the essence of this work. And if we can continue to work on creating conditions and learning how we do that as individuals, as organizations, as whole systems, I think the livingness that we are nurturing and stewarding will take care of itself. And I'm excited about seeing what that is. And I feel like the opportunity for people to participate, you could be a startup, you could be, a young organization, or even a mature organization that recognizes that the current way you're doing things is not serving your team, it's not serving your purpose, it's not serving your. And I agree with John, a lot of hard work, but it is work that will change and is focused on a generational shift, not just what we're doing quarter by quarter, trying to hit the KPI. And we need more organizations. It's not going to be all the organizations, but we need more and more organizations that say we're not designing on a quarterly basis. We're designing on a generation. And that's what we're cultivating, is the opportunity to create those kinds of conditions.
Thank you, Tre. Wow. Thank you, Mo, Tre, and John, for this incredible and insightful conversation. I know I'm feeling inspired, and I hope our listeners are feeling that too. So if this conversation resonated with you and you want to learn more about how to align your organization with life, how to create conditions for sustainable growth, or how to add organizational health as a vital measure, we invite you to join us. A reminder, the With Life Cultivator kicks off the week of September 9th. The application deadline is August 23rd, and you can learn more at nrhythm.co/cultivator. You can also join our community to learn more about all the online courses, programs, and offerings of With Life at join.withlife.community.